So as agentic coding is improving, one of the main things that we're doing to get these improvements is by including a bunch of markdown files and skill files to teach these models and these harnesses how to actually write good code and kind of follow along the path that's needed. So I wanted to give an overview of the four main skills I have seen online. We have the Karpathy skills, which is at 140,000 stars now. We have the Pocock skills, which is over almost at 100,000 stars. We have the Superpower skills, which is 200,000 stars. And we have the Git Shit Done skills, which is 63,000 stars. And these are the main skills that I have seen everyone use. And I've kind of played around with these as well, and they're pretty good. But I want to kind of give you my takes on when to use one over the other. And then also I'm going to be talking about my own skills that I have 0 stars over here, but I do hope that maybe you guys try it out and see if it's actually useful, because even AI ranks it as the best compared to these other ones. Okay, so the Karpathy skills honestly is like the most simple skill, and I'm not really sure how it got this many stars, probably because it's just the name Karpathy in it. So this skill is broken down into 4 principles. We have think before coding, simplicity first, surgical changes, and goal-driven execution. Now it's obvious that this skill is probably trying to address the issue with Claude Code modifying too many files and doing too much. Honestly, if you just prompt Claude Code by itself, it just works fine. But having this type of stuff in place can probably help the model work a little bit better. For example, no features beyond what is asked, that's probably something good to call out. If 200 lines could be 50, rewrite it. So it's kind of guiding the LLM to like really focus on writing the minimal amount of code possible to solve the problem. It has some language about removing dead code that's unrelated. I don't know if it has language about reusing code or finding utility functions, but overall, I think installing this could potentially help improve the output of these models when writing code. Honestly, I don't know if people actually benchmark any of these things. I think people just install skills because people talk about it, and there's literally no benchmarks to show that it actually produces higher quality code, or if it just burns through a bunch of tokens, right? But anyway, that's a really cool skill. I'll put it in the description below. The second one is the Pocock repo. He has a bunch of skills as well. The main one that got really popular is the Grill Me skill. So if you go to this productivity tab and go to Grill Me, this is one that basically, it's like one line, it's one sentence that kind of forces the LLM to ask you a bunch of questions. And if you watch his talks, he basically talks about how this skill can have the LLM ask you like 60 or 70 questions so that you're both on the same page of what you need to implement. Honestly, this skill may be useful for some people, maybe for some projects, but for everything I've worked on, it's actually kind of annoying to have an LLM ask you a ton of questions. Obviously, if you can't prompt properly and you don't have good acceptance criteria and you don't know what you're doing, then having the LLM kind of grill you and understand what your requirements actually are could be good. But for most of the engineering I've done, maybe having 1 or 2 rounds of questions can help you discover edge cases, but doing too many questions is kind of overkill in my opinion. But he also has some cool skills related to language and how like you can have a definition file for wording, and that can be used to help the output of the LLM. So you guys both align on whatever development jargon. He kind of talks about that here. Could be used to make the quality of the output just better. But a lot of cool ideas in here. He has a bunch of different like skills that are kind of, you know, ad hoc that you can kind of use. So go check him out, give him some more stars, help him get to 100,000 stars. This one, Superpowers, is another skill that is very popular. This has a certain amount of methodology in place to help you write really good code. Now, when I tried this a while back, again, it kind of felt in the same line of the Grill Me skill. Like it just sits there and asks you a ton of questions. I've had this thing ask me like 20 questions before, and I'm like, bro, I just need you to add a simple feature. Why are you asking me so many questions? And I found that these skills, like maybe they're really good for engineers who don't know what they're building. I just don't find a need for these. But the basic workflow of the Superpower skills is it helps you brainstorm by asking a bunch of questions, and then it's going to use a Git work tree to basically do the work. It starts writing some plans to help you break down the actual task into smaller tasks, and then it does sub-agents to basically build out and execute building the code. Test-driven development can be used to help make the code more accurate. This is actually very important when it comes to agentic coding. If you're trying to kick off a background task and let an agent run for 30 or 40 minutes, you do want to give it access to Puppeteer or some type of test runner so that it can verify that what it's writing is actually correct. And then it finishes with a code review and does some cleanup to kind of remove your work tree, and probably, I don't know, maybe it creates a pull request for you. When you actually have a workflow and you have phase development and you tell the LLM it needs to go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, etc., you're going to get much better output. When you have some type of gated inputs and conditionals to have it kick off different audits when it needs to do those audits, I have found that you get much better and higher quality code. It's going to burn through more tokens, but I want to be able to kick off a task and then come back in 30 minutes and not have to like refix a ton of stuff and then have to fix all this code that's not working very well. Now, the Get Shit Done skill, from what I understand, it's more like inclusive. So you do have to kind of like scaffold up a new project, and then you have to discuss phase one, like what is your roadmap? If you want to build something out from scratch all the way to finished using the get shit done skill, I think this one is pretty useful if you want like guardrails the whole way. It helps you with planning, it helps you with executing that plan, and then also verifying that work. And then you basically keep doing these commands where you plan out the next milestone and you work on it. Like it says down here, GSD is built for frictionless automation. Okay, so basically if you want to just kick off a big workflow of backlog items and have it kind of go through one by one and implement all of that, I do think this is a very good skill to have in place. And overall, this whole skill kind of works like a main loop, right? It does the plan, the implementation, the verification. And I would say that most coding agents should probably have some type of skill in place that's either like the GSD or the superpowers, where you have an actual defined workflow, and every single time you prompt it for anything that's substantial, it goes through this whole rigorous process of doing all these steps so you can verify that what it's adding is good. And by the time you have to come in, if you're doing a human in the loop type of development, you can review the code and it's pretty good from the get-go. So the last skill I want to talk about is my own Agent System Labs core skill. I've been working on this for a while to basically try to produce as high quality production ready code from a single prompt without you having to do much other work. Now the way my skill works is basically there's a top level router. Okay, so you do /ship and you type in what you want it to do. For example, you can say, hey, I need you to add in a new feature that does X, Y, and Z. And that's going to kick off a sub-skill called create. And that create workflow is going to have a different set of workflow steps and phases that it goes through for adding in a new feature. Now, the reason I have it broken down into different workflows is that often when you're adding in a brand new feature, there's different things you want to kind of make sure you've double checked, versus if you're trying to remove an existing feature, there's a lot of other things you want to go through the code base and make sure you don't have dead code that was maybe pointing to that thing you just removed. If you try to just ask Claude Code to remove a feature, I found that all it does is just removes that feature. It doesn't actually go through and figure out what was depending on it and also kind of traverse that and delete all that stuff as well. So based on what you ask, again, it's going to kick off these different workflows. And then I have different depths. So for example, if you want to just do a quick little change, you can do a fast mode, you can do a balanced mode, which may or may not add in some unit test or an end-to-end test, or you can do a production mode, which I think is the default, which will go through and try to do as much auditing as possible based on what's changed. So if you try to evolve an existing feature in your code base and you touch authentication or you touch a middleware function, it's going to automatically kick in some of these auth audits to make sure you didn't break anything. So I have a bunch of different audits that basically kick off based on what you're asking. And then at the very end of doing the implementation or the changes or the removal, basically we run a code review, and then we also run some additional things to make sure that the code is high quality, right? So I do this all the time on my projects. I typically keep it in production mode because I want it to write tests when it's implementing stuff. I want to make sure that the code is not duplicates, we don't have magic numbers, etc. But then also just the audit skill is very useful as well. I will sometimes just load up a code base and say, hey, I need you to audit the full code base using this ship audit skill. And then it goes through and it finds like 20 different things that we could potentially improve. And I've used this when building out mission control. I've audited this thing many times. I've gone through and I fixed some issues that it's flagged. And then also basically every feature that I add into mission control, it's automatically writing tests to verify that what I'm adding is actually accurate. Okay. Now I will say it looks like there's a lot of different things you can run in terms of this skill, but basically it just boils down to /ship. Everything you can do is just /ship. All this other stuff will get invoked automatically based on what you ask. And the main things that you can invoke manually would be the PR related things. So for example, I often just say commit and push directly in Claude Code to have it commit and push my changes. Sometimes I'll tell it to open up a pull request, which will check out a new branch, do a commit and push, make the pull request, make the description already, and then that's good to go for my teammates to review. Check PR readiness. Again, this is automatically kicked off by the open PR skill. So there's a lot of skills invoking other skills to make sure that when you're just doing a commit, it's not just pushing the code and calling it a day. It's actually like trying to chunk all the changes you've done on the main branch into grouped commits, push those up, make sure that the PR it's about to create doesn't have some slop code that's in it. Then it creates the pull request. It creates a really nice description, etc., etc. I'm already at 286 commits on this skill and almost like 47 releases. I have been trying to iterate on this thing to make it really thorough. But again, how do you verify this stuff even works? How do you know if this thing is actually accurate in improving your code base? That's the next step I'm trying to take. I have a skill tester that I'm comparing this against the baseline of Claude Code to see if it actually does better than the Claude Code's plan mode. And by the way, these skills are free in MIT, so you can go check them out if you want to play around with them. So basically, when you do a /ship, it runs through one of those 6 intents like I kind of talked about. Are you adding in a new feature? Are you extending an existing feature? Are you removing a feature? Do you want to audit some type of code base, right? And based on those and based on your prompt, it tries to infer the mode, right? So if it's something that's very simple, it's going to do a quick fast mode. If it's something that seems like it's going to touch security or backend endpoints, it's going to do a production mode, and it's going to try to kick off as many audits as possible. And then it enters step 3, which kind of goes into a plan mode. It asks you a bunch of questions, make sure that it's implementing exactly what you want and trying to clarify anything that might be confusing with your initial prompt. Okay, so after the plan mode, it actually is going to go and based on the intent, if you want to do a modify feature or a fix bug or a remove feature or an audit, it's going to run a completely separate pipeline of things. So we can kind of go through the add feature, but there's a bunch of others as well. The first thing it's going to do is clarify the open questions to make sure that the user understands what needs to be built, and so the AI also understands. Phase 2 is we explore the existing code base. It kicks off some sub-agents. It tries to make sure it really understands what you're trying to add in, and make sure that we catch any helper functions that might be needed, any utility functions. And then phase 3 is designing the actual implementation. Phase 4 is a plan mode. I do think there's some duplicate with this diagram. Like I think there's some overlap of like the planning, but basically if you approve the plan after it generated all this information, it'll try to kick off as many parallel subagents to implement it so that it kind of speeds up the implementation. And then when it's done, it'll verify it with TypeScript checks, lints, smoke tests, etc. And then we also have a phase 7 gated review. So this is the main meat and potatoes of this whole thing. So basically it's going to go through a code review. It's going to check your code for duplications. It's going to do a security audit on all the things you've written. It's going to do a performance review to make sure that it finds things that are slow, make sure you're writing React the proper way. It goes through and it finds maybe contracts that aren't properly being updated. Like if you change an API endpoint, did it go and update the Swagger docs? We have a check for concurrency. So if you're trying to deal with queues and workers and stuff, it tries to make sure that you're doing all this stuff properly. Observability, it makes sure that login's in place and you're properly handling error boundaries. We have a data integrity. So if you're dealing with database changes, migration scripts, it kind of does a more thorough analysis on that. And then finally, after that's all done, we do a phase 8. We write automated tests, end-to-end tests over all the new features that were added in. And then we basically try to run a post-step simplify, dry up code, dedupe code, smell check. And then it basically looks at the diff between yours and the upstream branch to try to figure out what it could clean up. Now, I've only done a surface level analysis on if this is improving the code that it's outputting. This is very hard to test. There's a lot of stuff going on. But I would say that this flow is probably going to become the future of agentic coding. Like you need to have these workflows in place. These models are getting better at following instructions and following these workflows and making sure it goes through all these phases. So like I mentioned, it's very hard to know if the skills you're installing actually improve the quality or the output of your code. And so one thing I like doing is I like comparing skills using AI. So I said, hey, can you take those 4 skills and compare them against what I have in my agent system core skill set? And I told it to rank it by the which ones you'd prefer for a production code base. And as I scroll down, it basically ranked mine as number 1. It says it's the most production ready for writing code that you'd probably want in a production ready code base, followed by the Superpower skill, which I agree Superpowers is really good, and then followed by the GSD skill, and then the Matt Pocock skills, and then in 5th place was the Karpathy skills, which even I looked through that, I'm like, dude, this is just a bullet point list of like things. Like I'm sure these harnesses can do just as good of job writing code. So don't just take it from me that my skills seems like they're pretty good. You can take it from Claude Code. It even ranked mine higher than these other ones, even though these skills could be trash. Who knows, right? You have to actually play around with these things and see if they're actually useful. That's about it. If you do want to try these skills out, feel free to go to agentsystem.dev/skills. I have a walkthrough of how to get this set up in Claude Code, or if you want to use the NPX skills that's provided by Vercel, you can install them using that as well. I will say if you're using this and you run into issues, go join the Discord community. This is where I'm accepting feedback or bug fixes or whatever for anything that's inside of the agentsystem.dev ecosystem. Right now, I also have Mission Control, which is a free to use product. If you want, you can have up to 2 projects for free. Anything after that, you do have to upgrade to Pro. But this is what I'm also using primarily to do all my agentic development workflows with the skills I just mentioned. So definitely go check out Mission Control. There's a free download over here. You can install it for any of these operating systems. If you guys have feedback or comments or criticism, which I know you guys will, leave a comment below. Other than that, have a good day and happy coding.